Hello, everyone. My name is Luke, and I would start the podcast by introducing the name of the podcast. But if I'm honest, I haven't even figured out what the name of it is going to be yet. But maybe the way that I should start this podcast is saying why it is I wanted to start doing this in the first place, and maybe just a little bit about who I am. And I think the reason that I started doing this is because, if there wasn't enough people's useless ideas polluting the internet, I thought that the world could use another. I'm just kidding. But the real reason that I started doing this is because not only are the lies that are prevalent in the mainstream media so aggravating, and I'd like people to be able to hear another perspective, but I've also found, especially as of recent, that even the voices that are in the alternative media or the so-called alternative media have really disappointed me. It seems like about the time that Donald Trump became president that a good portion of anti-establishment type people seem to think that Donald Trump was some sort of savior from on high who was going to root out the deep state, and they didn't bother to do anything like take a look at his cabinet and see that he wasn't draining the swamp, but if anything, he was filling the swamp with more swamp creatures or something to that extent. And then you had people of a more leftist persuasion. I mean, a lot of them began to make excuses for people like Hillary Clinton and say that it's better than someone like Donald Trump or what have you. And I've just found that overall that it is really disappointing to see, and especially disappointing to see with the alternative media, because the so-called job or whatever of the alternative media, even though it's not, I know it's not a homogenous group or anything like that, but the goal of it is to provide opinions that are outside the mainstream, ideas that are anti-establishment, ideas that put a threat to the status quo. And so far, I think that a lot of people in the alternative media have been failing to do their job. And I think that probably motivates me even more than all the lies of the mainstream media. Because that's what the mainstream media does, is it lies. It covers for the establishment. It's always been that way. But it's especially disheartening to see people who, regardless of if they were right or wrong about everything, who seem to be opposed to the current status quo, who seem to voice their opposition to authority. And I think that's something that hasn't been going on. And I think when we get into some of the subjects that we're going to talk about later, that's going to be apparent, and that you'll see that a lot of the people in the alternative media have either been silent on a lot of these issues, or they've fallen somewhere on the, two sides of the debate, which is extremely limited, whether they fall for, the so-called right or the so-called left. I mean, it's pretty much all just neoconservatism, neoliberalism, and they're both pretty much the same thing. But that is one of the big motivators. And also, I just have a lot of thoughts and opinion on things, and I know that I'm no genius, and I by no means have all the answers, but I thought maybe that there would be some people out there who may be able to appreciate the perspective that I bring to the table. And a little bit about who I am. I'm not going to share anything too personal, but I guess ideologically, or the way that I came into being interested in politics, is I started, like a lot of people start in politics in the Midwest. I like how I say start in politics, like I'm running, some gubernatorial campaign or something. But the way that I became interested in politics and what was going on in the world was I started like most people in the Midwest, just basic Republican constitutionalist type, and eventually I think around the time of the 2012 election is when I began to follow Ron Paul. I read a few Ron Paul books, and that's when I became a strong and avid libertarian. And I still have a lot of sympathies with libertarian. Some people may even describe me as libertarian in many ways, but I don't like to attach myself to any specific political ideology or put any specific labels on my ideas. But I do think that libertarianism has informed a lot of my view, especially when it comes to anti-interventionism and foreign policy. And I think that's something that you guys are going to see that is at the front of my focus to a large extent. And then after I got into Ron Paul, I started getting into some more conspiracy oriented stuff, even though that term conspiracy is kind of a loaded term. And I just over time began to learn more and more about what was going on and see how phony and fraudulent that the system that we currently have is. Well, I think that pretty much covers enough of who I am and why it is that I'm doing this, that we can go on and get into some other subjects. I feel like most of what I've said so far isn't anything all that new, and it probably isn't anything that you haven't heard anybody say before, especially if you have been someone who has been paying attention to the alternative media for a while. And it's something that you're deeply embedded in. I mean, a lot of this was basic on the surface level talk, but nonetheless, that is the reasons why I think that I'm, recording this podcast right now. And so the first subject that I really want to delve into, and I just like to preface this with I'm by no means an expert or the absolute authority on this issue, and I plan on putting in the show notes some links to some of the places where I got a lot of my information and knowledge of this subject from, so that way you guys can go review the same information that I have taken a look at and gotten a lot of the ideas and information I'm going to be sharing to you today. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the current situation in Venezuela. If you were to listen to what the mainstream media had to say about what's going on in Venezuela, you would think that what's happening is that Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, or this, as the mainstream media prostitutes would tell you, the dictator of Venezuela, is a horrible, awful man who has been starving his people, who has been trying to silence the opposition that exists in Venezuela. They'll tell you that the elections that have been taking place that Nicolas Maduro has won have been rigged and phony elections. They'll tell you that he is blocking aid from coming into the country. I mean, what kind of animal, what kind of monster could possibly block aid? And I love how all these people, who are the same freaking people who sold us the lies that took us into the Iraq war, who sold us the lies that created regime change in Libya. And now you look at Libya and they have an open slave market in Libya now again. So you can really see the democracy and liberation that the United States brought the people of Libya. These are the same people who have lied time and time again about all the different wars, about anything of importance. They've completely neglected the fact that the surveillance state is increasing, that they're spying on all of us. They have continually bad-mouthed all whistleblowers who come out. I mean, so this is the same mainstream media who has covered for the establishment and all the mayhem and blood that is in the establishment's wake. They've justified it, but here they're here to tell us that Nicolas Maduro is so bad and act like they truly care about the people of Venezuela. So if that's not the full story that we're being told by the mainstream media, well, what is? What is even really going on in Venezuela? I'm not going to get too deep into the background information of Venezuela, but Nicolas Maduro is what you would call part of the Chavista movement, who are big fans of Hugo Chavez, who became president of Venezuela, and I believe it was 1998. And he was a populist leftist, a socialist, who did a lot as far as nationalizing the oil industry of the country of Venezuela and helping redistribute that towards things like education and food and whatnot. And regardless of what your feelings are about redistribution and socialist or left-wing economic policies, that is what the people of Venezuela seem to really like. In Venezuela, the Carter Center, I believe, is the name of it. It was started by Jimmy Carter to monitor foreign elections and determine if they're fair, have said that Venezuela has some of the most pristine elections in all the world. I believe that you have to provide a thumbprint and an ID in order to vote. And so it is nearly impossible for there to be voter fraud. And for the most part, there has always been some sort of outside third party that has came and closely monitored and observed the elections of Venezuela. Each election that the opposition doesn't win, they claim that it was rigged, but they don't ever seem to claim that it was rigged when some sort of opposition member wins. So so the people of Venezuela really do seem to like Maduro, regardless of the way that you feel about him. And I've seen some of the people who are against regime change in Venezuela, and what they'll say is, I don't like Nicolas Maduro. I don't like the socialist policies of the country. I don't think that it's a good government, but I believe in national sovereignty, and I don't think that we should be meddling in the affairs of another country and that we should leave this problem to be solved by the Venezuelans. And from the outside, and that may be true, especially depending on what your perspective is, if you happen to be more left-wing or right-wing, but here's why I have a problem with framing the argument when it comes to Venezuela like that, is you're kind of repeating a CIA talking point by saying, Nicolas Maduro is bad and all, and I don't like him, and he may be a dictator, he may be starving his own people, but I don't think the U.S. should stop it, because it is that pretext which is largely fabricated. I mean, if we want to talk about issues that are going on in the world, what is going on in Venezuela, I don't even really think you could accurately call it a humanitarian crisis. I mean, certainly there is some suffering and pain going on in Venezuela, but it's nothing to the proportions that the mainstream media, that CNN or Fox News or any of the above would have you believe. So framing the argument in that light, I think, is a bit problematic. Man, I hate the word problematic. Social justice warriors have, I think, permanently ruined that word. I can't ever see myself ever using the word problematic and taking myself too seriously. But so I have a bit of a problem of phrasing it like that. And if you actually look at what some of the reforms under Chavez brought to the people of Venezuela, I mean, you had a lot. Let me pull up some of my facts that I have here, but I mean, poverty and illiteracy decreased dramatically under Hugo Chavez. Extreme poverty went from 23% in 1999, dropping all the way down to 8% in 2011. And so it seems that the masses in Venezuela, the common people, seem to enjoy this and to appreciate it. And Chavez and the whole Chavista movement, the Bolivarian Revolution, named after Simón de Bolivar, was wildly popular among the Venezuelan people. And for a long time, we've wanted to have regime change in Venezuela. In 2002, there was a coup attempt against Chavez. The attempt lasted 48 hours, but eventually the Venezuelan military and the people, because there was thousands and thousands of Chavez supporters who went out and protested in the streets, and the military was wildly in favor of Chavez, so they ended up reinstituting Chavez as president. But there was a failed coup attempt in 2002, and this has been on the minds of the establishment. This has been on the laundry list of countries that we will eventually destabilize, overthrow their government, come in, take all of their natural resources, and get it to a good price to United States companies. So that way we can, business can keep going the way that it is. So poverty and illiteracy and many things decreased for quite a while under the Chavez administration. And then Chavez died in, I want to say, 2014. And Nicolas Maduro was his successor. And then he won elections, I believe, after he secessed, or whatever the proper term is, for Chavez. And Nicolas Maduro, at some point, things began to go poorly for the Venezuelan people. So, what is it that happened? Is this finally the socialist policies of Venezuela taking a toll on the country? Or could this possibly have something to do with, I don't know, maybe the United States sanctions? And I figured out that there was some limited number of sanctions placed on Venezuela all the way back towards the end of the Obama presidency, I believe. But they have definitely ramped up under Trump, and especially as of recent, as of about January. We have really been hitting Venezuela hard with sanctions. And some of the things that don't go over to Venezuela anymore because of these sanctions are things like medicine, like what is the name of diabetes, like insulin. So a lot these sanctions definitely do hurt the people, and you'll hear the liars and prostitutes on the mainstream media say that these are targeted sanctions. These are smart sanctions, kind of like the targeted drones, the smart drone strikes that, end up killing some little, 6-year-old Afghan boy, or ruining an Iraqi wedding party where there are no terrorists. Smart sanctions that only hurt the rich and powerful of Venezuela, which is complete bullshit. I mean, it's a total lie and completely ignoring. These sanctions hurt the people of Venezuela. So a lot of the pain that the people of Venezuela feel, a lot of what's going on as far as the economic issues go back to these United States sanctions. I believe that we have placed sanctions on the nationalized Venezuelan oil company, PDVSA. And if there's one critique that you could really make, a strong critique against both Chavez and Maduro, is you could say that they have been a bit over-reliant on oil. And the United States understands that. And so they, targeted their oil so that way they can eventually get Maduro out, put in the CIA plant, Juan Guaido, who we'll get to in a little bit, and he can privatize the oil, and then you can have companies like Citgo come and take the oil. I believe it is Citgo. Let me read this quote that John Bolton said, I believe, on Fox Business News. We're in conversation with major American companies now that are either in Venezuela or, in the case of Citgo, here in the United States. I think we're trying to get the same end result here. Venezuela is one of the 3 countries I call the troika of tyranny. It'll make a big difference to the United States economically if we could have American oil companies really invest in and produce the oil capabilities in Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of the United States. So this is what we have, the lying scumbag war hawk John Bolton. I'd like to rip that stupid mustache off his smarmy little face. He's just like a herpes sore. He just keeps coming back. John Bolton. But who is the troika of tyranny that he's referring to? These are Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba. And obviously, these are just the three main countries in Latin America who haven't really been playing ball with the United States. They're a bit more left-leaning countries, and they haven't helped American business that, say Colombia has. So we have to go after them. And then, so John Bolton pretty much there openly admits that we're going into Venezuela for the oil, which you got to admire. I think this happened sometime during the Trump administration, but there has always been, a mask covering empire, and now it's kind of just out in the open. John Bolton's like, yeah, we're going for the oil, so that way American companies can. And I mean, how phony saying that's going to be good for the Venezuelan people. It's only going to be good for the fat cats, man. It's all going to benefit. The only people who are going to benefit from it. And so, when you hear that Venezuela has the largest known oil reserves in the world, it begins to make a little bit more sense what we're trying to accomplish with our new foreign policy changes towards Venezuela. It makes a lot more sense. So, we have the Chavista movement. We have Chavez, who's wildly popular. Then Nicolas Maduro comes. He's not as popular as Chavez, but he's certainly the most popular choice that they had in any of the recent elections, including the recent election that the opposition parties, for the most part, completely boycotted. And they say that the elections were rigged and that they weren't fair, but they refused to participate in them. But you begin to realize some of the stupid speech patterns and stuff you have when you're in a room alone talking to yourself. It's like 12:25 in the morning. My roommate's asleep. I'm just have been pounding coffee and thinking about what I was going to say on here. But yeah, so we have the mustached mayhem maker, John Bolton, talking about the troika of tyranny and just flat out stating that really the reason we're going in is, so Citgo can get their oil. So that way the fat cats can get fatter, man. So we have Chavez, who's popular. Maduro's less popular. And their economy is wildly reliant on oil. I want to say that it makes up I don't want to be lying, so hopefully I'm not. Don't trust me, but I want to say it makes up more than 50% of their GDP, and it's over 90% of their exports. I mean, they were completely dependent on oil to some extent. And so Venezuela really began to hurt after that. And so that's why we see some of what's going on economically is because of the sanctions, and them dang Saudis keep on pumping that oil like crazy, driving the price of crude down. Yeah, so that's what we have going on as far as that goes. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. It would just make sense that America would want to get its hands on that. I mean, we want to, be the policeman of the world anyways. We got to bring democracy to every last country. And by democracy, we mean we're going to bomb the living hell out of you, destabilize it, and then put some sort of U.S. puppet in there who does business with us and doesn't cause us too many problems. And we own the mainstream media, so there will be no negative coverage of this event. We'll have all the people of the West in our back pockets. That's kind of the mentality. So who's Juan Guaido? I'd be lying to say there was no opposition to Maduro or the Chavista movement in Venezuela. It's certainly not without the people who oppose it, but the majority of the people, I would say, are more sympathetic to the Chavista movement. But when we look at who Juan Guaido is, the man who, the day after he got off the phone with Mike Pence, just declared himself to be the leader, the president of Venezuela, despite never running in any election, but somehow he was the true democratic leader of Venezuela. I mean, you gotta just love the double speak. I mean, try to wrap your brain around that. But Juan Guaido, who was a member of the opposition-dominated National Assembly, was, and I'll put this as one of the links that I put down, but it's an article at the Gray Zone, which explains all the strange connections that Juan Guaido has and how he has basically been groomed by various CIA front groups and what have you to become the leader of Venezuela. But even among the opposition, so the opposition isn't the most popular in Venezuela. The Chavistas are. But even among the opposition, Juan Guaido's pretty much a nobody. And I believe, if I'm not incorrect, that the position that Juan Guaido held was similar to the position that like Nancy Pelosi has right now or something like that. So imagine if Nancy Pelosi came out tomorrow. Who knows? This could happen with as crazy as some of the Russiagate shit's gotten. Nancy Pelosi comes out tomorrow and she goes, I am the true leader of the United States. I am the democratic president, not this evil, horrible dictator, Trump. And then China comes out like within the hour and is like, yes, Nancy Pelosi is the true leader of the United States, and we hope that everybody recognizes her being the true president of the United States. And these poor American people who are suffering under Donald Trump, the horrible, evil dictator, surely recognize Pelosi as president. I mean, it's akin to that. I guess that's the best analogy that I'm capable of making at this time of night. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Do you guys like the sound of that? That cough, getting that phlegm out of my throat. So, absolutely ludicrous. I believe that a survey was done among certain Venezuelans that said that less than 1 in 5 people before, what was it? I have the date here on my phone. January 22nd even knew who Juan Guaido was, had heard of Juan Guaido. But he's the leader of Venezuela. If I'm not wrong, the name of the party he's running under in English is called the Popular Will. I mean, it's so Orwellian. It's absolutely fucking absurd. Absolutely, positively ridiculous. And so Juan Guaido definitely doesn't represent the Venezuelan people. He doesn't even represent, he's not a true representative of the Venezuelan opposition. Juan Guaido, the only thing that he represents is the CIA, Wall Street, American imperialism, a traitor to his people, a sellout. That's really what he is. He is just about the weakest kind of man who's willing to sell his own people down the river in order to benefit himself. And America, I mean, the people who've completely fucked over Latin America and the rest of the globe over ever since, I don't know, when do you want to start it? The Cold War. I mean, I guess imperialism really kind of started with the Spanish Civil War. You could probably go back further. So, and needless to say, there's little context offered in the mainstream media on the supposed new leaders of the opposition, not just Juan Guaido, who I'm going to post the link to the article explaining how he's, for lack of a better term, I think it's pretty apt description, is a CIA plant. That is by Max Blumenthal, I believe is his name, and a colleague over at thegrayzone.com. It's a fantastic article, and you get to see what I believe is Juan Guaido's ass. I mean, we haven't positively identified it yet, but I've been talking to some ass experts that I know who have been running a variety of tests, taking the pictures of Juan Guaido and the pigment of his skin and zooming in on the picture of this opposition protester's ass and trying to identify whether or not it is Juan Guaido. But there's a lot of great things, and it really might be Juan Guaido's ass if you go over to thegrayzone.com. So if you were wondering what a CIA plant's ass looks like, and we're not just talking about his head, hey yo, you can head over there. But more importantly, you can see just the extent to which the CIA meddles and is in the affairs of other countries. I believe that it was something like there was a State Department report from last year or something like that that says that the United States has been funding Venezuelan opposition, something attuned to like $5 million a year or something like that. This is another one of those things that I'm not absolutely certain of. Like I said, I'm no expert. I'm just your common average Joe. An average man of average pursuits who's gotten himself wrapped up in the big world of geopolitics. I'm down to earth. I don't know all the facts. I don't have all the answers. I'm just like you. Just like you. This is like the modern day equivalent to fireside chat. I'm just like you. But anyways, yes, the ass experts that I've consulted are working on the mystery of whether or not the picture on the Gray Zone is of Juan Guaido's ass or not. But certainly go check it out. But yeah, less than 1 out of 5 Venezuelans knew who he was before he declared himself the true president of Venezuela. He doesn't represent the opposition. Like I said, he represents the CIA, the cocaine importation agency. The same people who have been having coups over in Latin America since back in the Cold War era, when Alan Dulles was the freaking director of the CIA. Overthrowing governments so that way they can get bananas at a better gosh damn price. I mean, it's absurd. This time it's for oil, but it's usually about natural resources. And I think more importantly, even in the natural resources, I think sometimes that people get a little lost in thinking that the dollar is the sole motivating factor of all this, which, don't get me wrong, money to some extent does make the world go around, but a lot of this has to do with power, has to do with American hegemony, however the proper way to pronounce that word is. It really, I think the end goal is global domination. These people are obviously insatiable. It's like the last scene, or close to the last scene in Chinatown, where made by the lovely saint known as Roman Polanski. Roman, get in the tub, my little darling, the hot tub, and drink this totally non-alcoholic drink that I made for you. Polanski. It's a long nickname. You know, I honestly kind of lost track of what I was doing. I tried so hard. I stretched so hard to make a joke about Roman Polanski that I kind of even forgot what it was that I was talking about. I apologize for that. Maybe you guys can connect the dots. See, it's fun. Now this is a whole interactive listening experience. You can see if you can put the pieces together. Maybe you can make something out of it. So I think that's enough for the moment about Juan Guaido, but let's go a little bit deeper into some of the corruptness of just the whole narrative that we're being fed about Venezuela. So I guess while we'll go back to Guaido for just a second, but the UK, which I would imagine is at the behest of America. I mean, at this point, pretty much all of the Western allies in Israel, the agenda's, it's all lockstep with one another. They don't ever seem to really have any all that meaningful disagreements with one another. But the UK, the United Kingdom recognized Guaido as the leader, and the Bank of England blocked the transfer of $1.2 billion of Venezuela's gold out of the bank at the request of Guaido, because they recognize him as the true leader. The CIA plant. U.S. officials have been trying to steer Venezuela's overseas assets to Guaido in an effort to increase Guaido's chances of seizing control of the government, which is just completely obvious. That's why they've been blocking credit, so that way it continues to worsen the situation of Venezuela, cause more desperation among the people. Hopefully violence breaks out and either create a pretext for a U.S. invasion if that's what they want, or maybe they want a proxy war. Maybe they just want to keep on funding the opposition, keep on doing all these various intelligence operations, these CIA operations, in order to destabilize the region. So that way, Maduro gets deposed somehow and Guaido gets put in. Venezuela sold 3 tons of gold from its central bank to the United Arab Emirates firm, Noor Capital, presumably, so the cash-strapped country suffering from U.S. sanctions could secure much of the needed money to alleviate the effects of the alleged crisis, this humanitarian crisis. Which, don't get me wrong, I don't want to sound like I'm being dismissive in saying that Venezuela is the dream to live in, but a lot of the talk of violence and starvation and stuff, it's being dramatized dramatically. And speaking of, maybe I'll also link to this, but you can see this at the Gray Zone, that while CNN is saying that the Venezuelans don't have food, they don't have toothpaste or toothbrushes and other basic toiletries, this is not the truth. Venezuela has been suffering from some hyperinflation, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, I believe, if I'm not wrong, that Venezuela has been printing off, creating a lot of money in order to try and alleviate some of the effects of this, and of the U.S. sanctions and the declining price of oil because of countries like Saudi Arabia trying to produce a lot of oil in order to drive the price down. This has resulted in that's what brought the situation to Venezuela. And once again, I kind of forgot where I was going, but let me just pick up right back where I was a second ago. So yeah, they're selling off gold and they're printing a bunch of money and doing all these various things in order to provide some money, so that way Maduro can try to restore basic functions of the government and, help alleviate some of the effects of sanctions and all the things that are going on in the country. But I mean, it's not as crazy as the mainstream media would have you believe. First of all, I mean, they'll tell you things like, people are eating out of the trash over there. Well, America has its homeless. We've got people eating out of the trash over here. We've got enough money to house every homeless person, and I forgot what the number is. I want to say it is something like absolutely ridiculous, like $100,000 home or some shit like that. If we were to take the money that goes the defense budget and put it towards that. Which, I mean, I'm not even saying that we should do that. Maybe it's not a bad idea. I don't know. But, I mean, it is certainly crazy. So, they've been selling gold, and I believe that there's even more gold at another bank. Okay. Well, first let's go. Marco Rubio, the Cuban terror. I don't even know what we call him. Rubio claimed that this was theft. What Maduro tried to do with the gold, I believe, is what he was referring to in a tweet that he posted. Like the U.S. has any authority over what Venezuela does with their natural resources. I think that should probably be up to the people of Venezuela, which it seems like, for the most part, the majority of the voting populace has made up their mind. And now news has came out that the U.S. bank Citigroup may liquidate more than $1 billion of Venezuelan gold on the open market, which could potentially drive the price of gold down. So I don't have very much gold because I'm not a very rich man, but the very tiny bit that I have, I mean, shit, this could affect my pocket. This shows you how wide-reaching the consequences of this is. Slightly joking, but also kind of not. But anyways, that's not the point. That's just what the fiat dollars that my gold is measured in. I mean, if you believe in inherent value, which I actually don't know if I believe in inherent economic value. Because, I mean, you can watch the videos. I freaking can't stand Mark Dice. He's such a smug douchebag. But if you guys know who Mark Dice is, he is this New World Order, Illuminati guy, but he's not even like the smart type of, because, I mean, I believe in, I mean, it's become a bit of a loaded term, and I don't like how prevalent it is in the pop culture and how misunderstood and demonized this, phrase has been. But, New World Order or whatever. But Mark Dice, maybe the only good thing that he's really ever done is he's made some pretty telling videos where he'll offer like maybe a someone at a Taco Bell, instead of money for the taco, try to pay with a gold coin, and they'll turn it down. Or he's even done even crazier ones where he walks up to people on the boardwalk in like Santa Monica or something like that. I don't know how someone making money off of self-published, or what I believe are self-published books and YouTube videos, can afford to live out in California. Is Mark Dice who he says he is? How do we know he's not part of the corporatocracy, the fat cat class, bruh? But anyways, he'll have these videos where he'll offer someone a 1 ounce gold coin or like a Snickers bar or something. And they always take the Snickers bar or whatever bullshit he's offering them instead of gold. And you would think, like, with phrases like, it's as good as gold, or that's like gold, liquid gold, or, I mean, you'd think just, I mean, that these people have to have heard of what gold is, but the fact that they don't understand that it's of greater value, whether you want to talk inherent or subjective, just, market price value, I mean, the fact that they're not accepting the gold is absolutely ridiculous. But anyways, I mean, so obviously the gold doesn't mean anything to that person, Snickers bar means more. So what does an inherent value even mean? Because I mean, to a large extent, I think it comes, but I'm getting off on a diatribe. Let's get back to Venezuela, because that wasn't all that interesting, that diatribe. Rabbit holes are allowed, but only when they serve to the greater purpose of entertaining or educating. I don't even know if there's that much educating going on, but hopefully there's some entertaining. Even if I'm super, super dumb, I mean, that's kind of fun in its own right. So they may liquidate more than $1 billion. Citigroup may liquidate more than $1 billion of Venezuelan gold on the open market. Back in 2015, Maduro conducted a cash for gold swap with Citibank, where you trade in gold for cash. And if he's unable to pay back the loan when the gold swap with Citigroup expires, which is coming up in March, Guaido's advisor, Angel Alvarado, so take it with a grain of salt, but he says that Citigroup would be entitled to the gold. But the reason I decided to include what this Angel Alvarado, this advisor of Guaido, who knows, he might be some sort of CIA lapdog too. But I said it because, I mean, the way that the law has been interpreted, the way that Venezuela has been treated by the Western community, I think that could certainly happen. I mean, after all, we had the Bank of England transfer of $1.2 billion of Venezuela's gold. American banks have freezed a great deal of Venezuela's assets. Now let's go on to the aid. And speaking of freezing Venezuela's assets and all these different sanctions and stuff, I don't have the exact numbers, but you can find rough estimates that are pretty telling, even if they're anywhere close to being true, about the money that is being lost by having all their assets, the billions of dollars being siphoned away from the Venezuelan people through freezing their assets, through the sanctions, through driving the price down of oil, Saudi Arabia, through all these different things. The money that they have lost from all of that, which is pretty much all a result of the U.S. and co., the U.S. gangsters, the mustached mafia led by John Bolton. So the amount of money that they have lost because of the U.S., because of sanctions, the money that they send in aid pales in comparison to the enormous quantity of money that has been lost, or not even lost, stolen from, seized. I tell you, seized. So definitely, that's a load of shit. So that tells you that the U.S. aid that big evil boogeyman Maduro's blocking, the horrible son of a bitch, that aid, that peanuts in what we deny the Venezuelan people, all the insulin and things that we keep from the Venezuelan people. The aid pales in comparison to what can be directly attributed to the U.S. and the government, the sanctions that the U.S. has placed on Venezuela. So what is the aid about? Why are they doing it? And we recently saw this past weekend, or I believe maybe it was Thursday or something like that. Not too long ago, we saw a clash at the Colombia-Venezuela border. USAID trucks were trying to come into Venezuela from the Colombian side. And first, the bridge that they were trying to use, which I believe it's called like the Tienditas Bridge. I took a note of it somewhere. I apologize, everyone, for all the breaks that I'm taking to try and figure out where I am in my notes. I'm doing it off of a document on my phone, so it's kind of narrow. It's hard to find my way around. But the U.S. lied about Maduro blocking aid to Venezuelans in the way that you've been told. I mean, he has blocked the U.S. aid, but there's good reason to. The mainstream media said that the Tienditas Bridge, it's got a longer name than that, but the Tienditas Bridge was blocked off using oil tankers and cargo containers by Maduro to prevent aid from getting in. But if you look at the overhead shots of the bridge, one of the first things you'll notice is that this bridge looks like it's hardly ever been used. Like it's maybe like this is some of the first that's been used. And you'd be correct, because the bridge has been there since, I want to say, I don't think it's been in use since 2015 or 2016. It may have even been constructed and never been in use. But the mainstream media acted like by bringing trucks to this closed down bridge and staging this photo op, this complete bullshit propaganda tactic, our so-called free press, these people who are fair and unbiased at CNN, the bright minds at Fox or whatever. But you know what? Maybe I shouldn't knock them by saying the bright minds, because it works on people over here. The few people who haven't been so disenfranchised by contemporary American politics to where they haven't completely tuned out and quit watching the news. Pretty much old ass people. That's the only people who are watching these cable networks. It's freaking old fuddy-duddies who can't even figure out how to find alternative media. I'm sure that they would lie. I mean, you look at the people that these old folks like. I mean, for instance, among the conservatives, that's the people who I have the largest demographic to talk to where I reside in the States. They really like Tucker Carlson or something like that. It's because, he gives this slight allusion to being anti-establishment. He talks a good game on some things. Sometimes I'm even surprised to hear what he said. Like, I think he's been pretty against regime change. I think he eventually came out against regime change in Venezuela, but he's been doing that bullshit about, I don't want regime change, but Maduro is a dictator and the people are eating zoo animals. They're so hungry, they're eating zoo animals. How horrific. But he probably on his way into his office at Fox News passes homeless people on the streets who are eating out of garbage cans or, whatever, and probably doesn't think twice about it. But he wants to get on air and virtue signal about how much he cares about Venezuela. But at least he's voiced some level of opposition to it, I guess. I'm beginning to feel like I can't even say words like opposition. All the terms have been so co-opted and politicized that, problematic, opposition, popular will, all these Orwellian terms. But I need to get better about that. So this bridge wasn't open. And it hasn't been open since its construction in 2015. That's what my notes say here. Both the United Nations and the Red Cross warned the U.S. not to send aid without the approval of Maduro, and basically said that this was a PR stunt by the United States. And it was one that the mainstream media once again backed up the United States in. I mean, it's, there's a revolving door between it's all the establishment. And Maduro also had a good reason to believe that humanitarian aid could be used as a cover to deliver weapons or other materials to the opposition forces. Since, like, for instance, Elliott Abrams, the man who was appointed the special envoy to Venezuela, did precisely that 30 years ago. And I'm going to read a brief little bit from an article that I will try to remember to link to, along with all the other stuff in the show notes, to where you guys can become big brains like myself, and you can become smarty smart pants, and you can impress everyone with your knowledge about Venezuela, because that's definitely what impresses people. It'll get you a girlfriend or a boyfriend. I hope that there's some girls listening. Last time I did anything that was similar to this, I eventually gave up on the project, but I had like a 95% male listenership or something like that. Or at least that's what the analytics told me. So, Elliott Abrams, the special envoy to Venezuela, this smarmy little mouse of a man, I like to rip John Bolton's mustache off his face. I don't know what I even want to do to Elliott Abrams' big stupid ears. Hope he didn't hear me. He might have me overthrown and replace me with some sort of CIA plant if he hears. No. Once again, stretching for jokes. So Abrahams was convicted. Father Abraham. Okay, sorry. Elliott Abrams was convicted of 2 counts of withholding information from Congress during the Iran-Contra scandal while working as Assistant Secretary of State in the Reagan administration. He was later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush and worked for President George W. Bush as a national security advisor. As documented in the first 2 paragraphs of a 1987 Associated Press New York Times article on Elliott Abrams. Abrams denies wrongdoing in shipping arms to Contras, the title of this article. Assistant Secretary of State Elliott Abrams has defended his role in authorizing the shipment of weapons on a humanitarian aid flight to Nicaraguan rebels, saying the operation was strictly by the book. Mr. Abrams spoke at a news conference Saturday in response to statements by Robert Dumling, former head of the State Department's Nicaraguan. Oh my goodness, guys. Got to be careful saying words like that. You never know what an awful white man such as myself might slip up and end up saying. That's probably close enough to where I can never run for president now. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. Former head of the State Department's Nicaraguan Humanitarian Assistance Office, who said he had twice ordered planes to shuttle weapons for the Contra on aid planes at Mr. Abrams' direction in early 1986. So, is Maduro just some sort of crazy piece of shit for not wanting to allow USAID? Well, here's something that the mainstream media is probably not going to tell you. Russia, I believe maybe even Iran, I also believe China, has provided Venezuela with some aid, and Venezuela gleefully accepted, pretty much without second thought. So, why would, they not want to accept U.S. aid? Well, there you go. Elliott Abrams used aid shipments in order to smuggle weapons to the Contras over in Nicaragua who were fighting the Sandinistas. This was during the Reagan administration, around the mid-'80s. And a bunch of people died as the result. It took whatever level of conflict there was and completely exacerbated it. And he had to end up getting pardoned for his actions. What he did was illegal. He's a criminal, a war criminal. Not just any criminal, a war criminal. And he used such a dirty, underhanded, bitch move tactic, like sending weapons in supposed aid to the Contras in order to supposedly prevent the spread of Marxism, which is just served as a convenient excuse, just like jihadism did under the War on Terror. And now we've brought the Cold War back. It's Cold War 2.0, baby. Russia's the boogeyman again. Donald Trump's Putin stooge. Just don't pay attention to how he's completely shredding the nuclear proliferation treaty that we have with Russia that has been a pivotal part in preventing another arms race or the continuation of the last arms race between the U.S. and Russia. So don't look at what he's actually doing, the fact that we've become more hawkish to Russia, all the stuff that happened in Syria and all the proxy wars where Russia. Now, I don't think that Putin's probably doing this out of the goodness of his heart, but they usually end up taking the side of the better people in these conflicts just because they want to oppose U.S. hegemony, and the U.S. always seems to do business with the worst of the worst. But yeah, Elliott Abrams was named Special Envoy to Venezuela. Gee, I wonder why Maduro wouldn't let this humanitarian aid in. I'm sure it's just because he's an evil man. And this is the same Elliott Abrams who is also linked to the previous failed coup in 2002 in Venezuela. The same Elliott Abrams who tried to stage a coup in Palestine to overturn the election results of 2006. The same Abrams who protected the dictator Manuel Noriega from facing any possible repercussions for having opposition leader Hugo Spadafora tortured and killed. Gary Webb, who exposed some CIA drug running during this whole Iran-Contra scandal, writes in his book, Dark Alliance, talking about what Manuel Noriega had done to Dr. Hugo Spadafora and what Elliott Abrams helped cover for. When they found Dr. Hugo Spadafora in September 1985, they found everything but his head. The rest of him had been tied up in a U.S. mail sack and dumped under a bridge on the border of Costa Rica and Panama. His body bore evidence of unimaginable tortures. The thigh muscles had been neatly sliced so he could not close his legs. And then something had been jammed up his rectum, tearing it apart. His testicles were swollen horribly, the result of prolonged garroting. His ribs were broken, and then, while he was still alive, his head had been sawed off. And if you're wondering what the word garroting means, it basically means to strangle. So that's why his testicles were so horribly swollen. The kind of lovely people that the U.S. gets into business with. And this is the same Elliott Abrams, and that was all in Panama that took place. But this is the same Elliott Abrams who in 1982 helped cover up the El Mozate massacre in El Salvador, where the Salvadoran where over 500 Salvadorian people were killed, including children who had their throats slit and girls as young as 10 years old being raped. The government of El Salvador killed around, I believe, 70,000 people during the 80s, but Abrams considered our policy there a remarkable achievement. In 2013, the former Guatemalan dictator, Efrain Rios Montt, was convicted by a tribunal in his own country of genocide and crimes against humanity. Who was instrumental in securing U.S. funding for Rios Montt and whitewashing his crimes? Well, none other than Elliott Abrams. So, Guatemala, El Salvador, Panama, hell, even regime change and proxy wars and, everywhere from Palestine to Panama. Elliott Abrams, who helped engineer the Iraq War with his neocon buddies. People like the mustached maniac John Bolton. And Venezuelan officials, government officials, actually said that they discovered a crate of weapons and ammunition delivered by a U.S.-based plane this week to an airport in the city of Valencia. They said that the crate consisted of 19 assault weapons, 118 ammunition cartridges, and 90 military-grade radio antennas. Yeah, this has nothing to do with helping the Venezuelan people. 86% of Venezuelans are against military intervention. 81% disagree with the current sanctions. Has absolutely nothing to do with helping the people of Venezuela. And it'd be foolish to think otherwise. We have people spinning all kinds of lie about this, but we have people like the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who recently just spit some Iraqi weapons of mass destruction level bullshit propaganda when he said that, quote, people don't recognize that Hezbollah has active cells. The Iranians are impacting the people of Venezuela and throughout South America, and we have an obligation to take down that risk for America. So be very afraid of Venezuela, because didn't you hear Hezbollah has active cells over in Venezuela? I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous. And the fact that old geriatrics who can't figure out how to work a computer and find something more interesting and persuasive than the mainstream media, the fact that some of them eat this up, and some of them, their brains are probably just such mush from all the prescription medication that they can't really make sense of it anyways. But anyways, that's enough about Venezuela. And now we're going to move on to the next subject, which is Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, the Somali neo-Nazi. Just kidding. I mean, that's how people are acting after what she tweeted, which we're just about to get into. So let's discuss the Somali pirate of the body politic, the hijab-wearing heroine herself, Ilhan Omar. So, House Minority Leader Republican Kevin McCarthy said he would initiate investigations of two Muslim congresswomen, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan and from Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, over their criticisms of Israel. McCarthy called for the two to be denounced by the Democratic Party as anti-Semites after Tlaib had said that the sponsors of recent legislation intended to benefit Israel by limiting free speech. And the legislation that it's referring to is the anti-BDS legislation, which was, I believe, passed on shutdown with pretty much zero people contesting, except for, I maybe want to say, Rand Paul. This is the U.S. where boycotting is a right and part of our historical fight for freedom and equality, she said. Maybe a refresher on our U.S. Constitution is order, then get back to opening up our government instead of taking away our rights. Then Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept responded to the news of the McCarthy threat with a tweet saying, quote, "It's stunning how much time U.S. political leaders spend defending a foreign nation, even if it means attacking free speech rights of Americans," which is certainly true. Ilhan Omar then tweeted her own rejoinder to Greenwald on the 10th of February, where she said I can't believe it didn't come out of Hitler's mouth herself. What did she tweet? What did those little brown neo-Nazi fingers type out? Well, she said it's all about the Benjamins, baby. Quoting the notorious anti-Semite Puff Daddy, I believe that is. Which is a reference to, Benjamin Frank being on the dollar bill, all that. I'm sure you guys know that. And her comment was almost immediately used to say that she was anti-Semitic, which, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. There's nothing anti-Semitic about it, People were saying that she's saying that McCarthy was bought by Jews, which is absolutely not what she said. And then she followed up answering a question about who is responsible for this. And she said AIPAC, which it's certainly true. I mean, AIPAC is a giant lobbying group. They use money to influence people who vote the law into existence, or however I should phrase that. So, I mean, that's absolutely what's going on. She wasn't wrong anywhere in her analysis. Nancy Pelosi, that witch of a woman, said that her use of anti-Semitic tropes and prejudicial accusations about Israel supporters was, quote, deeply offensive. Chelsea Clinton, which I like how her mom's like responsible for so much death and mayhem, and she wants to get on and wag her finger at someone for quote, trafficking in anti-Semitism. Donald Trump, who has been very open that he intends to serve Israeli rather than American interest. I mean, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He has, continued to fight in these proxy Middle East wars. Well, not fight, but, it's not like he's on the front line himself, but to continue to fund, to continue to send drones into these countries. Ultimately, it does a lot to benefit Israel. We continue giving Israel $3.8 billion in aid a year, I believe. Quite a bit of money. I believe it's $38 million over a 10-year period, $3.8 billion a year that we give Israel. And that's not even as far as it goes. That's just USAID. Even though that Israel's a super developed country, they don't have very many starving people. They don't have problems with not being able to produce infrastructure or carry out basic services for the people. So it doesn't make sense why we're giving this relatively developed nation so much money. But basically, people from both sides of the aisle came out to condemn Ilhan Omar, because anytime somebody says anything of importance, there's pretty much a bipartisan effort to fuck whoever stepped out of line over. She apologized by Monday afternoon, 18 hours after the original tweet, saying that, quote, anti-Semitism is real, and I'm grateful for Jewish allies and colleagues who are educating me on the painful history of anti-Semitic tropes. My intention is never to offend my constituents or Jewish Americans as a whole. We have to always be willing to step back and think through criticism, just as I expected people to hear me when others attack me for my identity. A Muslim Somali American, that's what she is. This is why I unequivocally apologize. But she made sure to affirm that at the same time, quote, I reaffirmed the problematic role of lobbyists in our politics, whether it be AIPAC, the NRA, or the fossil fuel industry. It's gone on too long, and we must be willing to address it. 2 days later, a motion sponsored by Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York passed by 424-0. Wow. It was specifically intended to serve as a rebuke to Omar. It is stated that, quote, it is in the national security interest of the United States to combat anti-Semitism around the world because there has been a significant amount of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel hatred that must be strongly condemned. Which, I like how they're beginning to blur the lines between hatred of Israel, or more specifically, the Israeli government, for being anti-Semitic. Which ultimately, that's what a lot of these people would like, is to have any criticism of Israel become completely conflated with anti-Semitism to scare people out of opposing Zionism, out of opposing the genocidal regime of Israel, the far right-wing Likud party ran by the good old boy of the International Criminal Network, Bibi Netanyahu. The Israel lobby has amassed over $229 million in 2017. Benjamins, baby. And the lobby's combined budget is over $1 billion a year. $1 billion a year. Or at least that's what many people estimate. So this Kevin McCarthy guy who spearheaded this attack against these two women, he receives $33,200 in 2018 from Israel PACs. The amount individual congressmen receive is dependent on their actual or potential value to the country of Israel, to the Zionist project. Senator Robert Mendez of New Jersey received $548,507 in 2018. Beto O'Rourke of Texas received $226,690. And these do not include individual contributions of $200, of under $200, by the way, which are definitely still encouraged by AIPAC. The average congressman receives somewhere around $23,000 from one of the many major pro-Israel organizations, which it's not just AIPAC. There's a lot of big Jewish groups and Christian Zionist groups who lobby for Israel and in the interest of Israel. And they've sold out the U.S. and American servicemen who go to fight in these wars and all the other people in order to benefit a foreign nation. One that's founded in basically the attempted genocide of an entire population. It's continued. They're continuing to genocide the Palestinian people. It's practically, well, not even practically, it's an apartheid state. The Palestinian people do not have the same rights as Jewish people. They get kicked out of their lands by Jewish settlers in the region. I mean, absolutely despicable what's going on. And seems like American congressmen and senators and the media has been basically bought off, and that there's enough pro-Israel, enough Jewish and Christian Zionist money going around through Washington, D.C. to where nobody bites the hand that feeds them. Former Representative Brian Bard observed, quote, "Any member of Congress knows that AIPAC is associated indirectly with significant amounts of campaign spending if you're with them, and significant amounts against you if you're not with them." Laura Friedman, who worked on the Hill for 15 years, notes how congressmen and the staffs of both parties told me over and over that they agreed with me, but didn't dare say so publicly for fear of repercussions from AIPAC. You have people like Sheldon Adelson, who contributed $82 million to the GOP, and Haim Saban, who donated $8,780,000 to the Democrats in the 2016 presidential campaign. And they have both openly stated that Israel is their main priority, not that of the United States, not that of the American people, not that of people all around the world, but Israel. That is what matters to these specific wealthy Jewish donors. And both Jewish and Christian Zionists alike, but it's definitely not anti-Semitic to point out that there is a lot of pro-Israel money going around through Washington. And there's a 4-part documentary series that you can watch on YouTube, which I couldn't recommend highly enough. Once again, I believe Max Blumenthal was one of the people who worked on this podcast, on this 4-part series. But it's where they have an Al Jazeera investigative reporter go undercover in the Israel lobby. And it starts off with infiltrating pro-Israel student groups on campus who do things as crazy as reporting back to Israeli intelligence services, things that they notice at their school how BDS activists on campus are targeted, how they have data collected about them or spied on by many of the people in these pro-Israel groups, how they have databases of information about these people, how things about certain BDS supporters, information is sent over to Israeli intelligence. Some pretty crazy stuff. Then it goes into how pro-Israel money goes into the pockets of congressmen and how AIPAC circumvents all the regulations and rules that prohibit the just, outright paying a congressman, writing a check saying to do this, and all the underhanded ways they go about circumventing the laws which are supposed to prevent that type of lobbying, and how they will, pay for people to get on a plane and go visit Israel at one of the nicest resorts there. So that way, tell a congressman, go ahead, bring your girlfriend, maybe bring a couple of your kids, go have a fun time in Israel. And they come back, and after they receive this money or get sent on lavish, expenses paid vacations, it does a lot to sway influence. And there's enough money going around that even the people who don't necessarily like the agenda or have some sort of qualms with it, they don't say anything because they're afraid of not receiving that money or having some group like AIPAC go after them. And worst of all, what happened to Ilhan Omar? Being smeared with that term anti-Semitic. Joe Sabran has a quote, "An anti-Semite used to be someone who hates Jews. Now it's just someone who Jews hate." Which maybe that's a bit of a cynical quote. It's certainly not worded in the most PC terms ever, but nonetheless, I think that it fits here. That is a lot of what's going on. And it's these people feigning that they're offensive, pretending like this is playing into negative Jewish stereotypes. I mean, you would have think that she said that they're all, hook-nosed coin lovers, and, it's nothing like that. She said that the reason that congressmen, go against freedom of speech, the First Amendment, in response to the Glenn Greenwald tweet, why do they do this? It's about the Benjamins. Who supplies the Benjamins? AIPAC. They certainly do a lot of it. There's other groups, like I think, for instance, AIPAC's not radical enough for people like Sheldon Adelson. So he's started pro-Israel groups of his own and donated to other pro-Israel groups that already exist, who have a bit more of a more radical agenda. So this documentary where the guy goes undercover into the Israel lobby, after it goes into Congress, it goes back to some of the stuff that's happening on campus, and it keeps going back and forth between these two and some of the, not the ADL or the Simon Wiesenthal Center, but groups like that. I want to, like the Louis Brandeis Center for something or another, who was a Jewish Supreme Court judge who got, some sort of foundation, which their job is basically to smear people who are for BDS or who are anti-Israel or claim to be anti-Zionist as anti-Semites, and are trying to create a legal conflation between the two and have it written into law. But yeah, it's called The Lobby USA. The thing about it is, it seems like YouTube really doesn't want, or, probably more like the ADL has contacted YouTube and told YouTube that this is a really troubling video and that they would like them to, it's not technically in restricted mode, I don't believe, but it certainly seems like they've been censoring it, because if you type in The Lobby USA and you go scrolling looking for it, you might find some people, given their personal commentary on what they thought about it or whatever, but you most likely will not find the video. So the way that you find it is you type in the Electronic Intifada, and it will be there under the Lobby USA. There's part 1 through 4, and it's absolutely amazing journalism. And even if you're someone like me who thinks you could not be any more shocked with some of the underhanded tactics that Israel and its supporters would use to gain influence over the American electoral process, I mean, it's absolutely confounding. You'll watch it, you'll be furious at points. At some points, you'll just laugh from the absurdity of it all. But yeah, it's a crazy documentary, and to see the way that these people think and the way that they phrase things in their own terms, and how aware on some level what they're doing is some cunning trickery, they're not being honest. It's obvious that they have an agenda and that they're trying to push that agenda. And they know that $3.8 billion in aid a year, that helps get that agenda done. They understand that silencing, whether it be, BDS or any other people who vocalize support for the Palestinian people or who are vocal about the crimes of the Israeli government, they realize that it's effective to silence those people, to smear them with the term anti-Semite or Nazi, to conflate them with hatred and racism when it has nothing to do about that, when it has to do with the self-determination of a people. The fact that you can't come in where, I believe it was something like 95% of the population was either Palestinian, and then there's 2% that was Christian or something like that, that you can't come in and establish an ethno-state in the middle of an existing country where there's people who occupy there, people whose homes are there, and just decide that that's enough of them. But anyways, I think that I've probably gone on rambling long enough. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'll try to provide the links to where I got a lot of my information from. I would encourage everyone to go watch the Empire Files interview with Alfred de Zayas, a UN investigator who went and checked out what was going on in Venezuela and how he would not call it a humanitarian crisis. Pretty interesting. I will also put a link to some of the stuff I talked about with Juan Guaido being a CIA plant, the article at the Gray Zone. I will post a video of Max Blumenthal walking around through a Venezuelan grocery store, and I believe Caracas, and showing that they have plenty of food, toiletries, toothpaste, toothbrushes, that it's just that inflation and speculation and whatnot that's going on in the economy and is being done by the fat cats of Venezuela, and how they have food, and how it's no means a shortage of food or supplies that Venezuela is suffering from. It's U.S. sanctions and the resulting inflation of the currency and all the other things that are taking place over there. And I will put a link to the 4-part The Lobby USA series that is up on YouTube. So that way you can avoid trying to find it in the YouTube search engine, because it can be a bit tricky and it seems like they're not wanting people to see it, but it's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's got some very crucial information as far as understanding how the Israel lobby works, how it gets money to congressmen, how it goes about manipulating the public discourse. It's absolutely fantastic. So I hope that you guys have been entertained by this. I hope that you guys have maybe learned a thing or two. And I'm excited to talk again soon. And I'm sure that there's going to be more developments in what's going on in Venezuela. And hopefully for the Venezuelan people, we can hope that will be some positive news. I will not hold my breath. Also, I'll probably throw in a video of Ilhan Omar into the show notes, where at like some sort of like Senate hearing or something like that, she's questioning Elliott Abrams about the El Mozate massacre, I believe, and if he still considers it a success. And it's really fun watching her grill Elliott Abrams, and she's certainly an interesting person, someone who I'm going to keep my eye on what she has to say and what she keeps on doing. And it seems like as of right now that she's one of the few consistently anti-interventionist, anti-war people in the U.S. Political body, the body politic. So I'll probably link that video too. But anyways, yeah, I think that I've talked long enough. I hope you guys like it. Maybe by the time I post this, I'll have a name. Even if I don't have a name that's solidified and maybe it could possibly change, I still encourage you guys to follow this podcast if you enjoyed what you heard, because I definitely plan on making more in the future, and it should be a good time. All right. You guys have a good day or night, whatever it is where you are. You are free as of the moment to listen to podcasts when you like. But it won't be long before Big Brother only lets you listen to Big Brother radio at selected times where radio time's allotted. So enjoy it while you can. Anyways, we'll continue talking about the people in Venezuela, all the Marco Rubios threatening through Twitter, people like Maduro saying, don't end up the next Gaddafi, showing the picture of Gaddafi's bloody face right after he gets shanked in the ass with a bayonet or something like that, you know. So real lovely frets. We'll cover people like him, the Elliott Abrams and the John Boltons and Mike Pompeos of the world. All right. You guys take care, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Upload another podcast. All right. Bye. 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 Bye.